Thank you for the introduction. Good afternoon. I'm going to do my presentation standing because if I sit, I think we'll be here the whole day. There's quite a lot of information that we can share with yourselves with regards to our space or the area of work that we do within the city of Joburg. I think it's important just to let you know the fact that the city of Joburg is quite dynamic. It is actually representative of the whole of Africa in terms of the demographics, the population, and even cultural in terms of the type of people that you find in that city. My presentation, I'm just going to give you on a very high level the mandate that we have in respect of public open spaces, the context, the democracy, and the focus on the basic services. I mean, this is quite critical. I mean, if you look at just the presentation, the presenter was just left now. The beautiful pictures, the architectural designs that's happening now, in terms of the modern way of doing things and where we're going as the world in terms of greening. And if you look at also what's happening currently with regards to the politics of the day. So, you know, at times I even say that town planning is actually a collision course in politics. If you look at the populism, I will explain that a little bit further. And also just the economic space that we operate within against the politics that we have from a resource point of view, from social issues, and also just the provision of basic services. I'll give you a profile of Joburg, just a quick profile of that, and access to green spaces in terms of what we're doing, and also the initiatives that we have in terms of redressing the imbalances of the past, and then opportunities, issues, and trends that we've got. So that is more or less what I'm actually going to talk to you about. Just to give you a quick picture, if you see this picture here, right at the top, the park that you find in Soweto, Johannesburg. Now Soweto, you'll see there's a picture later on that I'll show you in terms of how Joburg is actually structured. Soweto is actually on the southern side of Joburg. It's a township that is predominantly black, and previously there was very little, if any, park development or open space development in this space. I'm sure most of you would actually understand the history of South Africa, the fact that there was apartheid at some point, and obviously apartheid created different opportunities and different spaces for different people. So in the southern side of Joburg, you would see later on as I present the fact that there was very little development. And post the apartheid era, as the city of Joburg, we actually embarked on a huge drive to try and green those areas so that at least we can then deal with the imbalances of the past. There's a map that I'll show you later that shows the fact that on the southern side of Joburg, it was completely dusty, where there was very little vegetation, nothing, no development was actually done there. And then we brought in quite a lot of resources post that to try and change that, and obviously that greenery is sort of like showing up. In the northern side of Joburg, you'll find that there's about, I mean, it's a urban forest with the amount of trees that have actually been planted there. But those have been there for a much longer time as opposed to the southern side of Joburg. You will see that. And on to your right-hand side, right-hand side, that's our botanic gardens. Now we're using these facilities mostly to get a lot of social cohesion. I've spoken about the fact that we do have different groupings within the city of Joburg. I mean, on the weekends, in these facilities, the one on the right, you would see people from different African countries coming in to actually have their weddings and take pictures and celebrate their weddings in this facility. So we're actually using those for social cohesion, trying to bridge the gap between the locals and the people who are actually coming from the outside. Obviously, there's a lot of learning that's happening. Currently, we are busy on the picture, second picture from the left. It's part and parcel of what we call the Josie Trails. What we're trying to do is that we're trying to create a network to meet the open spaces, the parks that we have, from the northern side all the way to the southern side. So a person can actually just jump on a bike from Soweto and can actually ride all the way into the city center, into the northern suburbs of Joburg, and vice versa as well. So it's one of the projects that we've actually started. We launched it, and before we even left coming this side, we had already a launch to even expand that sort of program, so that at least we link all our paths through these trails. We call it Josie Trails. And look, like I said earlier, also if you look at our method, we do have a zoo, which is right in the middle of the city, with a variety of animals and species that are sitting in there. So we utilize that also to create like social cohesion, where people from different areas come in and participate in that space. I mean, this is quite phenomenal. If you go into downtown Joburg, we almost have a similar picture, but this is just to show you what is happening throughout the world in terms of congestion. And at the end of the day, when there's very little, if any, space for people to have any recreation of any sort. And if you go deep down in the city center of Joburg, you will find almost a similar situation like what's happening in this. And the issue that was raised earlier, I want to say is 70% of the people are going to actually live in urban areas. That is extremely true for our situation in Joburg. Just to give you a little bit of information with regards to that. In Joburg, there's two types of migration. There's inland migration, where people are coming from the rural areas within South Africa, moving towards Joburg, because Joburg is seen as the economic hub. So everyone within the rural areas of South Africa, they've got a dream of going to Joburg at some point. And when you get to Joburg, the expectation is that you're going to get a job and your life is going to be much, much better. So everyone in the rural areas have got this dream of saying, I will go to Joburg. And you know, Joburg is known as Ebony. Ebony means the land of gold. So everyone has got this dream of going to Joburg and finding some gold somewhere. And that is the inward migration. Now, if you look at outside of South Africa, and if you look at the bordering countries, and the bordering countries there, especially from countries like Zimbabwe, from countries like Mozambique, Zambia, Malawi, there's also a whole lot of influx of migrants coming in there. Again, on the same principle, of the same concept of saying, we're actually going to Angola, which is going to the land of gold, which is Joburg. This thing did not start recently, but it's something that started even in more than 100 years ago, because I'm sure some of you would know that Johannesburg was actually founded on the gold that was being mined there. So migrants were coming from far afield, as Malawi, as Zambia, to come actually and to work in the mines as gold miners. So that is carried on. Just to also give you a bit of information with regards to that, I mean, less than 50% of the residents of Joburg are actually born in Joburg. It's actually people who are moving in either from other provinces, or actually people who are moving from outside of South Africa. So there's quite a lot of influence, and I mean, that in itself is a huge challenge in terms of saying how do you address the different cultural aspects from different people and different backgrounds. Just to show you a picture, this picture here is of how big in Cape Town. This is exactly what also is like in Johannesburg, where you have on the one side Alexandra Township, and it's just divided by the main highway. You've got Sandton on that side. Sandton is actually the richest square mile in Africa. And on the other side, which is Alexandra, which is a township, you've got abject poverty. You've got the picture where, you know, that's the characteristics of the dwellings. And just to share with you, you know, in as much as trees, open spaces are celebrated on this side, you can imagine the structures that are on this side, trees are not necessarily celebrated. or even open spaces. They're not there. You can see there's absolutely no any open space on this side. Now, those trees are actually a danger to the people there. As the trees get old, they tend to fall on those houses or temporary dwellings that are created. So our job as city parks, it's extremely difficult because on this side we are called on to come and maintain, do the grass cutting, and just maintain the aesthetics. But on that side we're actually called into to cut down those trees because they are seen as a danger to the communities, and this is what we have to address all the time. Yeah. So these are the two different worlds that we have to deal with. And obviously in our environment there are competing needs. And the politics of the day currently as it stands. Thank you. The politics of the day is as it stands right now. It's mostly about basic services. It's about populism. So we coming from elections. Last night when we were having dinner, we actually celebrated the fact that one of our previous mayors was appointed as a deputy minister for the local government. And so it's coming out of elections, you'll be surprised. None of the political parties, none of them, in their manifestos, in their promise to the people, spoke about the environment. None of them even worry about climate change. None. So you can see exactly where that is going. And then what takes precedent is basic services. And in that picture, when we're talking about basic services, there is no public open space there. Yes, we find houses there, but those houses you can see, there's very little that is allocated to public open spaces, for recreation, for even planting trees. So you can see that there's a bit of a challenge, and I think as we appreciate the opportunity to come and present at these forums, I think it's also important that these forums are kept alive, and we actually use them for us to our advantage to go and try and convince the lawmakers, the politicians, that you may be campaigning on short-term gains in terms of being in power, but the long-term effect of that is actually much bigger. Because what happens is that at this point in time, all the campaigns is about providing you with the basic services. We'll give you water, electricity, housing. But no one looks into the long-term impact of this to say what then happens in the long term. So in terms of resource allocation as well, we'll find that there's very little that is actually allocated towards your greening, your open spaces. And with the influx of migrants, when people come in, at times they don't have much, so what do? They then utilize those green spaces as their places of staying in those areas. Now, when they stay in those areas, again, there's a huge impact in terms of how those areas are supposed to be maintained. Just to give you a picture, this is the map of Joburg. Right at the top, you'll find that Joburg is actually divided into 7 regions. So your most affluent regions is your region B and C. The city center of Joburg is around region F. Soweto is in region G. And there's very little, if any, development in your region G. And the up and coming is your region A, which is District and Midrand. So in those areas, you find that there's a little bit of development that's also happening there. But your most affluent suburbs, from a greenery point of view, is your region C and B. From a population point of view, we're sitting at about
This is the census that was there in 2011, and since Corona, I think we're almost about 5 million people within the city, with a density of about 2,692 people per square meter, per square kilometer. Obviously, as we are seen as the economic hub, and like I said earlier on, the politics, when the new political administration came into power, they said they want 5% growth on a year to when they reach their term, which is in 2021. Now, that's a huge drive, which means they're focusing on job creation and they're focusing on a lot of property ownership. Now, when we're talking about property ownership, it means people, there's a lot of land invasions that's happening, where people will pick a piece of land. Now, even though it's not services, there are no services, they take that piece of land and they make it their home. Now, when they make it their home, it becomes extremely difficult from a planning point of view. You can't remove them. We do have laws in the country that says if anyone has occupied a piece of land for more than 72 hours, you need a court order to remove that person. So, and the court order process becomes cumbersome. There's another law that says if you remove, as a municipality, if you remove people from these open spaces, you must provide alternative accommodation. Now the city can't afford all those things. So it becomes extremely difficult in terms of how they do manage these public open spaces. This is the map that I'm talking about. Look at the central part. It's more, that's where the greenery is. The southern part, which is your region D, Soweto, we are marked on a strong drive during the Soccer World Cup that was in 2010, where we planted more than 200,000 trees. So you find that, you can see from the legend there that the Soweto is becoming green, but these are young trees and they are up and coming. But in your deep south, which is region G, there's very little, and there's quite a bit of work that we still need to do as city parks to try and green those open spaces. We also have what we call the transit-oriented development, where we're beginning to stitch the city together. As we develop, this becomes your mixed use. We're developing along those corridors. As we develop along those corridors, we then put in your open spaces, your cycle lanes, and all those things. But now the biggest challenge, like I said earlier on, with the politics. So when this transit-oriented development started, it included complete streets, whereby people are allowed to cycle on the side and motor vehicles driving without interfering with the cyclists. When the new political administration came on board, they said, sorry, we don't have money for cycle lanes. Can we discontinue that? We want to focus on housing. So you realize that, again, competing needs and competing demands for the limited resources that we've got. I spoke a little about the greening of Soweto, so I'm not going to talk much. But I'm saying we're utilizing these facilities for creating social inclusion, social cohesion, because we do have a number of people that are coming from different cultures. So we've got green gyms, we've got churches, right on your right-hand corner there. We've got churches that do perform their religious activities in our facilities, and a lot of activities in terms of exercise and kids play areas as well within our facilities. In terms of challenges, I spoke about the competing demands, the short political term. What happens with short political term is the fact that before any political administration implements all its plans, the term is come to an end, and the new one comes in, it stops everything else that we're doing and we're going to start all over again. And we can't always quantify the value of open spaces. Just to give you, right now we're actually coming out of a fight, a legal battle with property developers. They want land that was allocated for public open space for development because they realize that there's more money to be made as opposed to leaving it as a public open space. The last part there speaks to land invasions. I think I did speak to the fact that the political landscape that we have now is there's this popular view that says everyone must own land, but the land is not actually utilized to the best ability and to the best value for the city. There is progress though, like I said earlier on, there are quite a lot of collaborations that we have with the private sector. We've got a green belt that we're developing. I've spoken about that, and also the inclusion of communities in the work that we do is actually assisted us in making sure that we maintain these facilities at a very high standard. Let me stop at that. Thank you so much.